Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Ad Podcast. Today, we are talking to Dimi Albers, who is the CEO of DEPT. DEPT is a exciting hold company now in their 10th anniversary. We'll get into a little bit of their history in the interview today, but some great statistics that I picked up in my research. He has led the agency to expand to over 4,000 employees and team members across the world through private equity backing and over 32 acquisitions to grow to where they are today. They also work with blue chip brands like Google, Diageo, and Audi, just to name a few. So, Dimi, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, Dylan, thanks for having me today. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, me too. All right, so let's start with your origin story. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up, where'd you go to school, what'd you study, and how'd you get into the industry?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a small, not even town, we should say village, which was about 30 minutes out of Amsterdam. It's called Loosdrecht, which is one of the many words we have with a G in our Dutch language, which most of the people cannot pronounce. But that's where I grew up with my mom, dad, and my two sisters. Small town, pretty close to a slightly bigger town, which is like the television center of the Netherlands, kind of like Hollywood is or used to be for the US. Kind of the town. That's where I went to high school. And after doing that, and high school was mainly not being too much in school, but doing a lot of other stuff as well. And I then went to university in Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, I studied political sciences, which I did for a full year, of which I was in the university for about 3 months. And then I dropped out because I wasn't really sort of suited to go to university the whole time. So I dropped out and started working and never stopped since. Um,
Wow.
so I am, as Kanye West would call it, a college dropout,
Let's go.
which has worked well for me. I can imagine it doesn't for other folks, but for me it was because just in political sciences there was one thing that I loved doing, which was debating class. So it was basically the only time that I would show up. And then when I stopped doing a university, I kind of used that skill. So I went into sort of our business, but I went to work with a telecom startup, to be really precise. So this was back in 1999, just before the dot-com bubble was about to burst, I think. So what I did there is basically what we would call in Dutch a mannetje van alles, which basically means a jack of all trades that kind of helps out with anything. Two of the things that I really enjoyed there were one was designing and two was a small bit of coding, which actually turned out to be like a really great breeding ground for what I actually am doing now, because it's kind of technology and marketing that I learned there. I worked there for like 4 years. We sold that business to a big telecom giant. I hated working there, so I left after 5 or 6 months and let a little earnout go and whatever. And then after 6 months of traveling the world, I called up one of the founders of our original agency, Bart, because I had met him because we had sold some technology to the agency, some telecom technology. And then I said, "Hey, I'm looking for a new gig," and he said, "Well, that's good." So then I started at what now is DEPT, and I started in let's say what you would call now account and strategy. That's kind of my background. I love to work with our clients, brands, and kind of figure out how they can be more successful, and how we can help them do that. So that's what I started doing back then. And even now, every day, I meet at least one client because it's kind of my anchor of how to run the business. Because it's the only way, actually, I would say, to run an agency business like ours, is to really figure out what do clients need now and in the future, but also how do our teams actually work with those clients, right? Because I cannot go into a meeting without having spoken to the team. And when I speak with the team, I understand sort of what we are doing, what are the challenges, and how are the ways that we are working evolving. And then I can bring that to the conversation of the client. So that's kind of my background of how I ended up here.
I love it. So what was the timeline when you joined that first agency that eventually became DEPT and up to where you are today?
Yeah. So I joined the agency originally in 2006. So that's 19 years and 8 days ago, which is a long
Wow,
time ago.
that's awesome.
So I started then, basically did sort of my strategy and accounting for a few years, then opened up a new office here in the Netherlands, then built that out. And then in 2014, I became managing director. So basically took over day-to-day management from the founders. And then in 2015 is when we founded DEPT. So exactly 10 years ago this year. So I was first managing director of our Dutch business. Then we built out in Europe. So I became MD for our European business. And then we built out also across the US. And then I became global CEO. And I became global CEO in, I think, 2018. And have been in that role ever since.
Awesome. Well, that's a pretty amazing story. You don't hear about folks staying with a company, over that period of time these days. I thought I had a long track record with an 8-year run at an agency on the biz dev side, but that's pretty cool because it's not something that you hear as much these days. So we talked a little bit about your growth model through acquisition. You've proceeded over 32 acquisitions as you guys have grown and scaled DEPT. What is your guys' investment thesis? What were the criteria of those 32 shops? I'm sure some of them were different and there were some nuances, but what is your investment thesis from the perspective of what types of shops are you looking for when you guys consider an acquisition?
Yeah, so to start off with, so how we've built the business in 10 years, of course, is the combination of organic growth and inorganic growth. So the core of it is always, winning clients, retaining them, building it out, having them tell other clients to also work with us. So that growth over the past 10 years has been on average 20% plus per year. So that's kind
Wow.
of what we do, what sort of 99% of our time, that's what we do because we are here for our clients. And then if you switch then to what we call inorganic growth, which is basically the acquisitions, that again is always in line with what we think our clients are needing. So what basically in itself means we look at what we think our company should be able to do or cover in the coming years. And from that vision or demand, we come up with a thesis of saying, hey, we need companies that either cover a certain geography or cover a certain capability or maybe cover a certain industry. So that's kind of where it starts. So that kind of sets the as you would call it, M&A, so mergers and acquisition strategy. And once you have those, then indeed you have a few criteria. So we'll be searching based on what I just said, the strategic kind of setting that we've made. And then we look at a business, and that's fairly straightforward. Is A, it has to fit the strategy. B, it has to have certain health in terms of numbers, so it has to grow and it has to make some decent money. C, it has to have clients that fit our portfolio, which is fairly important. And then D, which is the most important thing, is culturally it should fit. So because bringing together multiple companies into one company, because we are opposite of sort of the holdcos, we have a one agency model. So there's no kind of holding setup. There's not a network. It's one agency which has offices across different markets. So that means that if we want to work fully integrated, we actually have to enjoy working together, which means that cultural click at the end is super important. It means spending like 1 or 2 days at least with each other in a room, figuring out that you are laughing very loudly often. And if you don't, then probably it's not for us. So that's, in the end, I would consider the first 3 things that I said sort of strategic and hygiene, and the cultural one is the decider ultimately on whether we go for it or not.
Interesting. You said something, you guys are taking what you would consider a anti-holding company model. What was the reason for approaching things in that way? And why do you think that's different than the current holdco model?
Yeah, so it's actually fairly straightforward, right? And with this, I'm not going to say that the holdco model is wrong. I just think that different clients need different type of partners for different things. And the key thing is that if you look at the work that generally holdcos, but even also the large consultancies or system integrators do, the clients often are quite happy with a lot of the things that are happening. But the key things that they tend to have trouble or problems with are being really fast, being really agile, and being really innovative. And what we basically said from the start is we need to build a company that can do those three things, because we might have roughly the same capability set as many of those holdcos or as an Accenture or whatever, but we need to be the ones that can move faster, that can be more agile, and that can really push that innovation. So that's why we've said, okay, we want that one model. And sort of if you look at the three pillars of how we've built that, one agency is that, first of all, we wanted to make sure that we are 50% tech and a 50% marketing focused agency. So you can like look at our headcount and our revenues, and you can split it just about through the middle. This is important because for brands to win in the market now and in the future, they have to be able to completely integrate technology and creativity, right? If you don't do that, it's not going to work out. So we want it to be 50-50, because otherwise you kind of lean towards one end, which means the other side will always be less strong. So that's one. Secondly is goes to that sort of agility and innovation. We love to do pioneering work. Our clients tend to choose us because we are the ones that will push them into the future. So this is really important to the type of work that we try to do. And then lastly, we wanted to continue to build a culture which feels very as a boutique agency. So when we started DEPT in 2015, we had 120 people and 6 partners who owned the business. Now we have 4,000 people with close to 200 partners that own the business. And that's super important because it means that so every client that works with DEPT, but also every DEPTer that works at DEPT, has a personal relationship with somebody who owns the business. And owning the business here means putting your own money into it. And we feel that is hugely important because it makes the relationship, it gives it more longevity, it makes it more personal, and it generally just makes the bond stronger. And again, I think that last bit culturally is so important because it enables you to have a bit less hierarchy than many of our global competitors. And it means that it gives you the opportunity to be more entrepreneurial and have people really push the envelope in ways that they might not do in other situations where it is bigger, more layered, and more institutionalized. So those are the three sort of pillars of how we built the business: 50-50 tech marketing, pioneering work, and then the culture.
Yeah, that's interesting. So does that distributed ownership culture, which I imagine comes from things like seniority and also the partners that you've acquired over the years, does that show up in the way how you guys set up leadership? Do you guys have more of a flat management system or culture, or would you consider it? I imagine it's probably more innovative in how you kind of think about leadership and structuring teams and things like that as well.
Yeah. I would argue that naturally there is hierarchy and there is an organizational structure, because otherwise, with 4,000 people and the clients we service, it just doesn't work right. But I would agree, or I would say that compared to many of our competitors, there are less layers. And between, let's say, layers, there is more connectivity, so to say. So I would argue that in our company, it would be less of a threshold for people to contact me or get me involved in something than it is in some of the other businesses that we compete with. So I think that we generally try to make it as flat as possible, which in turn means that growing within the business is probably somewhat easier, faster in our business than it is in others, because you have to go through many more steps there. And again, it makes it a bit more personal, I would say.
So how is the US expansion going? It's obviously the biggest market. There have been plenty of examples of European boutiques and agencies based in other parts of the world coming into the American market. How's that been for you so far? How long has that process been playing out? did it start originally with European clients giving you the US market and then growth from there? But tell me about it, a little bit about the strategy and how it's going.
Yeah, so to give you a bit of a feel for sort of the timelines, also because you asked it before. So when we started in 2015, the first sort of 18 months were mainly in the Benelux market, so the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, which is kind of nearest to us. Then the next 3-4 years were focused on Europe, where we built out. And then in 2019, we made our first step into the US, which was a small shop in the Boston area that we acquired, and let's say a tech-focused shop. And the reason for going for it was indeed, let's say, client development. So we started to see that the work for international brands was expanding, and we started to see first working for them in, let's say, part of Europe, then a bit more across Europe, and especially once you work with clients in the UK, sort of the connection to the US becomes easier. So we did that first acquisition in 2019. Then, of course, COVID hit. So when COVID started, we still only had like 50 people or something in the US and a tiny bit of our revenue. And then end of 2020, still in COVID, we started accelerating. And basically between end of 2020 and I would say fall of 2022, we really accelerated to a point where we got to roughly 45% of our revenue being in the US. Or Americas, as we would call it, because there's a few smaller markets around it, and we have, I think, around 1,200 people there.
Wow!
So it's worked quite well for us. Quite a few acquisitions and some really healthy organic growth that we've been really happy with, and it now enables us to sort of across the US, also because we have a fairly good footprint across both the coast as well as in the middle of the country. So we can now work for basically any client in the US. We have the right coverage. We have enough boots on the ground, as they call it, and we can compete there. What you could say though is that we are still tiny in the US compared to a lot of groups, right? We do $250 million or something in revenue. We have those 1,200 people, which is really nice and sizable. But there's so many large holdcos, consultancies, agencies out there. So a lot to win. Definitely also on our brand name, because DEPT is still, as I said, right, in 2022, we were basically new. That's also the moment that we started to look towards rebranding everything into DEPT. So the DEPT brand as an agency really operating in the market has only been there for 2 years, which is like super young if you think about it.
Yeah, totally. We talked a little bit about it before we started the interview. DEPT is a shortening for department, which I kind of got very easily. But can you tell me about the brand? What does it stand for? And what was kind of the thinking in the rebrand?
Yeah, so in the end, so we had started off from as I said, previous agency. It was called TamTam, which is basically the drums, right? The first mode of communication. When we started having more teams join it, we quickly saw, okay, you cannot put everything under the one name. We need to come up with something which is new for everybody to really kind of align with. We then did a typical work on your own brand and value prop as an agency project, which are always the worst ones, as you will probably also attest to. So ultimately, we worked on the naming. There were long lists, up to 330 names, I think. There were short lists. We didn't really land on something. However, in the short list, there were multiple variations of the word department. And we really liked that because, the premise of our agency is, we combine tech and marketing across the full customer journey. So it means it's bringing together those specialists in an integrated team, which in its term, basically, you could interpret as if a client comes to me and asks about, hey, I need to work, I have a problem with how I'm using data in my media spend. Then I would say, hey, I'm going to bring you Wes because data is his department. And sort of from that way of using the word department, kind of as, hey, the very best specialists you can find who together can create the most value for a client. That's why we love the word. And then we thought, but we want it to be like a unique word. So we kind of took the abbreviation, pulled off the period, and came up with the word DEPT, which is great in non-English speaking countries. But we figured out that in English speaking countries, it's the worst when it comes to findability and search and all that jazz. But
Yeah.
we
Yeah. You
chose
think
the
about the
name.
SEO.
Yeah, yeah. So the old SEO, which apparently is going away,
True.
was not really friendly to us. However, we've chosen the name now. We're sticking to it, and at some point, it'll be strong enough to even get through the toughest of SEO, or geo, as they call it nowadays.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about geo at some point. I've been exploring that topic quite a bit. But one thing that I thought was interesting, I've noticed that your offices are designed to look and feel like hotels and restaurants. Um, maybe it's a little bit of a nod to Dutch culture and your heritage, and the fact that some of the Dutch hospitality is kind of a known thing, and just kind of some of the best restaurants in the world are in the Netherlands. But could you talk a little bit about your approach to physical spaces, as that is a reflection of your culture and kind of the environments in which your teams operate?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, I want to make something clear. I think most cultures in the world will beat us at hospitality. It's just especially you guys in the US. Many cultures, at least as Dutch people, we would say most of the other folks are more the hospitality is better. However, look, I think the key thing to our culture, and I spoke a bit about it, the importance of it, and having the partners and the ownership and everybody knowing somebody who owns the business. I think the core of it is that we understand that ultimately, an agency like ours is a place where people work, 5 months, 5 years, 15 years, or maybe 50 years. But the essence of it is do some of the best work of your lives, and do that while building relationships that hopefully will last you a lifetime. And if you take that as a premise, it tells you to make, it steers you to make a bunch of decisions, including what is an office. And I think we just figured out that we wanted it to be a place where people like to go instead of have to go. And then we have one guy in our company, Daniel. He used to be a strategist, and somehow he became very focused on culture and offices and etc. And he basically brought in an interior design studio, which had never done an office before, but only did restaurants and hotels. So like the Hoxton Hotel and a bunch of really cool places. And we brought them in because we thought, okay, if we use them to like design our HQ office in Amsterdam, then we have this basis that we can use across the world. So they came in. I think actually that the studio itself never did an office after, but one or two people spun out a new company that solely does offices, which I think is a funny story. And then we got to a concept, and now if you go into our offices across the world, then most of those will look and feel exactly the same. And it generally feels like a place that people really love to go to. So it's important. And again, it's because we think that facilitates that idea of doing some of your best work and sort of building friendships that last in those spaces.
I love that. How are you guys thinking about the idea of return to office and structuring? Some young people want more flexibility. Some people think that we should be back in the office all the time. How are you guys dealing with that dynamic, and where have you guys landed?
Yeah. So this is, I think, probably the struggle that everybody has. So let me start with where we've landed, and then kind of tell you how we got there. So where we've landed is that we have no sort of global mandate that people have to come into the office. But we do say, hey, folks, we think it is best if people go into the office 2, maybe 3 days a week, because we know it really improves a lot of things. And the nice thing about having a global business with where different cultures have come together is that we have businesses where we can literally see here people are in 3-4 days a week, here they're only 1 or less or whatever it is. And the data is like super clear. Where people go into the office more, the results will be better, both financially, client satisfaction, and most importantly, employee satisfaction. So we have one team here in the Netherlands, smaller design team. They require everybody to be in the office every day, and they, for the past years, have performed the best. Client satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and financial numbers, both growth and profit, by the way. So we know that. However, you have to keep in mind that every country has a different geographical layout. In the Netherlands, you might have to travel an hour. In the US, it might be 4 hours, and you cannot ask that from people every day. Plus, we are a relatively young business, so there's a lot of young people, and young people have a different view on it. Also because 2020 is already 5 years ago, right? And there's a lot of people who are now have a career of 5 years, which means they only know this weird setup of hybrid. So ultimately, we've said, look, we think it's best to come together, do that as much as possible around the clients and around cultural events. But let's not mandate, because it's just not going to work out if we hard mandate it in today's world. So that's where we've landed, and we might sort of in the future lean more towards the one or the other side. But that is the way we look at it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think having the guidance of our culture is about teamwork and collaboration, so we encourage that as much as possible. Excuse me, almost sneezed. But then,
almost bless you.
But and then I think it's also exciting that you guys have actually studied it and you see the research, because like you mentioned, there are a percentage of the workforce that all they've ever known is this virtual setup. So they think that somehow equals freedom because they don't have to commute into the office every day, that they've just never had that in-person experience. So maybe it sounds bad, and then, going to the gym every single day isn't good for you. Well, it's good for you, but it might not be something you want to do every single day. But at the end of the day, it's the better thing to do. So sometimes you have to execute some professional discipline as well to do the things that are best for you, your career, and also your business, which I think is also interesting.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think that patience is sometimes also a virtue, I think is what they say in English. That we also just have to accept that for some people, there will be a moment where they figure out that being in the office is really beneficial to them, but it just might not be now, and it might be in a few years, or it might be because of that one project, or because they meet their new boyfriend and they decide to move house. Then, hey, maybe let's move into a city where we have an office, and then I go in. And I do think it's important to you cannot be black and white about these things, nor any of the other cultural elements of a business like ours, I think. So it's fine to in some cases not make really hard choices, and kind of let sort of where life and the world spins lead us a bit.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think that's a good philosophy. It's about meeting people where they are, and understanding that you have a diverse workforce with diverse geography, as you mentioned, diverse needs, diverse life stages. So I think you guys are handling it probably in a really good way. So it wouldn't be a podcast in the marketing world if we didn't address AI. You've recently launched DEPT AI to harness AI for clients, personalization and productivity. What would you say are some of the practical applications of DEPT AI, which you're seeing the most promise and the most excitement? And are you seeing clients come around to leveraging AI in work? Because I know there's been a risk tolerance that seemingly is starting to break down, and there's being more and more experimentation. So can you give me maybe just a state of the union as it pertains to DEPT AI?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it took you over 28 minutes to start about it, which I think is commendable, Dylan. because most of these chats are the freaking worst.
Yeah.
Everybody pulls that topic out really quickly. So first of all, thank you for that.
Of course.
That makes this one already much more enjoyable than many other chats. But to give you a bit of a state of the union on it, look, I think AI is obviously sort of pretty central to a lot of the things that we do. I think it is good to know, sort of as a preface, that being 50% focused on marketing, 50% on tech services, it means that we have the benefit of like a lot of engineers in our business, over 1,000, who sort of are much more focused on the real hardcore technical side of it. Many of them have already also been applying it way before sort of the first iteration of ChatGPT. So that kind of gives us the opportunity to dive pretty deeply in it, and not just apply some of the technology which is out there, but also really sort of the experience that we have within our engineering teams. So with that as a preface, it means that it's starting to, even with clients with a relatively low risk tolerance on what you ultimately produce for them, I do think it's kind of tough to take it out of the daily lives of our people, right? Because there are there's the stack where we've created the debrief modules where people can just at pace, you bring in the brief based on the knowledge we already have of the clients, the research that we can pull from different sources across the world, really work on debriefs really quickly, which can then generate also the first ideas that we need to do on both the process as well as the actual strategy or creative or technology of projects. So that's really on the front end. Then it is really about the creation, right? And again, thinking about all the different things we do within the company. There is the places where we actually use AI to generate actual content for our clients. There, if you look at the risk appetite, I think that especially in text, we are a lot further than we are in, let's say, imagery and video. So I think there is a massive opportunity that a lot of people sort of kind of not look at first around any of the written content that we are creating, especially within sort of CRM, SEO, and all those places. I think there's a how do you say that in English? An underestimation of how manual and I would say error prone content generation, especially text content, is across the world. Just think about any retailer who have thousands and 10,000s of SKUs, and that all need to be on retail media. They need to be on their website. They need to be in their ads and etc. There's a massive work that we're doing there to really expedite that type of content creation. Then there is a lot of work in that we are deploying in the quality control of content, right? I think it's super interesting. Some of the work that we, for instance, been doing with Sainsbury's, which I think is the number 2 supermarket in the UK, where we're basically on their retail media platform are constantly or have built an AI stack that does the constant quality checks of any content which is being made by any partner who wants to advertise on their platform. And I think that becomes really interesting because normally we always everybody would make assets and then sort of provide them, have them checked and come back. And now we have the technology to do all those things live, which means that you can just take away days, sometimes even weeks, when it comes to content creation. And that says a lot about sort of the cost that you can save. So I think there's a big piece there. And then there's the piece of more engineering side. So how fast do we roll things out? How fast do we create the software that we build for our clients? How many lines of codes are being written either by humans or by the machine, so to say? And that's the other part where we push it a lot. So I think safe to say it's kind of happening across all the different parts of how we build journeys for our clients. And I must say I'm fairly optimistic generally that although the technology is going fast, I think the adoption for clients will never go that fast because it's life, right? Whenever you and I have to change the way, I don't know what your morning ritual looks like, but let's say that you've had a ritual for even 2 years. The moment you have to change that, it takes time and you need to get some convincing in. And the first time you try, it doesn't work. and then because you felt way better when you were doing your whatever workout in the morning. Or so, and I think because all those companies, all those brands, they have people working there, and that takes time, right? And why am I connecting that to being optimistic? Is it means that the change doesn't go as fast as many of the people are predicting or saying as it is going. And I think it is, if as long as we stay connected very much to how we help our clients go through the change, it also gives us the opportunity to train our people and to adopt the technology in a way that safeguards jobs and that increases quality instead of just sort of looking at slashing costs.
Yeah, that's interesting. So even though the sector is kind of in a zero-sum race to, just constantly improving the technology and making it smarter and faster, the need for organizations to make small incremental changes or change things at a slower pace will probably, in your mind, maybe dispel some of the, digital disruption woes that many people are afraid of, mainly around job loss. And I think I'd love to get your perspective on how you guys are thinking about this. But I hear the main issue that a lot of agency leaders talk about is the idea that as AI begins to optimize what most would consider tedious or time saving or labor intensive, boring work, but what was usually delegated to entry level or frontline people, and also looked at as kind of earning your stripes in some way, going through tasks that maybe wasn't the most fun work, but was, eventually setting you up with base knowledge and skills for the next job. How are you guys thinking about talent retention or talent development at the front line when some of these tasks are becoming more automated?
Yeah. So being slightly optimistic, I think that we should, the fact that those type of jobs are changing doesn't necessarily make it less good than it is now. I would argue that, now more than ever, we are looking towards, folks who are either just coming out of school or who have been doing something different in their working lives and who are making the switch from a different industry into our industry. And why? Because this is the moment where you don't necessarily need to have done what we do for years and years,
Mm,
right? It actually, where we used to look at CVs and be like, okay, this person has done this for 3 years, or if they haven't done their internship in one of these companies, then it doesn't help or whatever. Now it's kind of the other way around, and it's much more, okay, what kind of sort of really smart, fast, and almost AI native people can I get in, because they will be able to evolve our craft and our trade faster than some of the people that have been doing it for years can do it. So, although I totally understand, right, that if the designer that used to make the same advertising banner ad like 16,000 times in 220 days during their first year, I get that, right, that person is not there. But on the opposite side of that, there is the, okay, what is the prompt engineer that I need to get that stuff done? Or what is the right person to actually communicate with the client over that and be really strong in the process of making sure that it works? And then sort of you can go endlessly on. It just, there's a change, but the change isn't necessarily bad. And I would argue that getting people in who haven't been doing what we do for years and years and years is way more useful, because they will also not be scared of doing things. Because a lot of people who have been in the industry a long time are a tad scared, which I understand, because it might, yeah, if you introduce this bit into your job changes, and if you don't want to change, it means your job is gone. So I feel quite good about it. I don't really see the problem yet.
I like that. No, that's great. This is the second time that I've heard from an agency leader talking about the optimism perspective, but definitely as it pertains to new hires or people coming in at kind of the entry level, where it's more about the fact that they are AI natives, as you mentioned, they have AI skill sets, and they're actually coming in and teaching how to be better at these tools. So it's not necessarily that they even ever need again to go through some of those manual processes that maybe some people think of as the training ground or the 10,000 hours that you need to master a skill.
Plus,
If
I would always argue, Dylan, is that there are enough jobs in our industry which are not entry level, which will still make you pay your dues badly, and
yeah, good point.
it will still hurt, right? So the way I would look at it is, look, they can jump in faster to what we would argue now is a higher level. But I think there's enough pain at any level which they can learn from, and they can make many nights, and they can hit their heads, and they can whatever it is. They just it's an interesting dynamic, right? If you were to be, I don't know, somewhere between 18 and 26, 27, 28 now, like just it will be way faster to get you a certain skill if you are able to utilize these technologies and have the free sort of space in your brain to adapt to it, which means that you can bring so much value into companies. So I see it fairly positively.
That's awesome. All right. I want to go back to culture for a moment. You guys have three core values: empowerment, openness, and client centricity. We talked a little bit about how you show up for clients and the idea of how you practice client centricity in an everyday habit. You meet with a client every single day and you try and learn what they need and how they work with your teams internally. Can you maybe touch briefly on these three core values and how do they show up in culture and in work?
Yeah, I think, look, so we probably didn't put this in any brief, but I am not the biggest fan of defining values and then writing them up everywhere and putting them on the wall, because I honestly feel that, 2 years ago we might have used different words. If I am sitting in our Denver office in the US, it might feel slightly different than when I am in our London office or in our Mumbai office. So I think ultimately what it comes down to is we like to have a company where either for the people who work there or the people that work with us, our clients, where they can feel that there are certain characteristics of the relationships that are being built. One of them is that client centricity, right? Ultimately, they pay our salaries, we don't. So it should always be about the client. And the other parts are, can you basically be the same person that you are at home? So can you be really open and transparent about who you are? And can you speak with the people around you in a way that is based on trust and not on anything else? And I think that, if I were to ask our colleagues in Argentina, that they would describe it slightly differently, but they would come down to that same dynamic, which is, in the end, we are here for the client. We need to be as we are at home, and we need to be able to talk to each other as we are normal people, and not because of whichever corporate hierarchy or corporate setup that was made there. So that's kind of how I think we try to build our culture, and if you read between those lines, then there is a certain down to earthness in it, which I think is really important, right? We I don't know if we can curse here, but sort of the no asshole.
Morris, go for it.
There you go. The no asshole policy is like really important in our business. And in Dutch we have this saying which translates horribly to English, but act normal because it's weird enough. And what that means basically is it doesn't matter who you are. If you think that you're the shit, then you're probably wrong. So I think it's about that type of way of interacting with each other, right? Down to earth, no assholes. Don't think that you're all that. Act like you do with your mom at home, which means that you're going to be honest. Which means that you're going to like clean your plate when you get off the table, and that you'll be there to help people when they ask. It's kind of that's the stuff.
I love it. Yeah, that idea that you spend just as much time with your colleagues as your real family. Why not treat them like family? I feel like that's showing up more and more in culture. Less of this, ambition by any means, kind of internal politics at a level that feels like Machiavellian or a political game or kind of
Yeah.
leadership through fear. I feel like some of those old ways of management are shedding themselves in newer organizations like yours, even with 10 years of track record.
Yeah, that's how I think that's what we try. And I think also in the going back to our name, right? That idea of ask Wes because it's his department, or ask Lori because it's her department. There's a certain reciprocity in there, if I pronounce that correctly, which
Yep.
is very much around there's always somebody around you that you can ask for help and that will make the work for the client better. And that in itself means that you need to be prepared to ask those questions, but it also means that if somebody comes to you, then you need to be able to help them, even if you are stacked and you don't have the time, and figure out, because that's sort of how it works. Because within your family or within your group of friends, if somebody asks for a bit of help, then you tend to give it to them. And if you're in trouble, you tend to ask them for help. And I think that that is something that we try to build as good as we can. Also goes wrong, right? There's a ton of stuff that we totally screw up here, but we try and work hard to retain that part of the culture.
I love it. So as you reflect over your 10-year anniversary, that's a major milestone for you guys, all that you have accomplished. What are you most proud of over what you've been able to do over the last 10 years? And then looking forward, what are you most excited about for the next 10 years?
That's a good. That's like choosing which of your kids you love the most. I have two sons who are somewhere behind this door who would punch me in the mouth if I say the other name. No, look, I think in the end, I think and hope that most of the people that have worked here or are working here, and the clients that work with us, will tell you that they enjoy working with us because we do some great work, which gets them great results, and we do it in a way that feels like it's actually good, and it's a bit of fun, and it's nice to work together. And ultimately, I think that's what I'm most proud of, because whenever you grow a business quite big, basically one of those things or both go away, right? At some point, quality doesn't become important anymore, and at some point, sort of in human interaction or culture doesn't become important anymore. And I think that although it's been bumpy, we've been able to retain a focus on both, and I think that that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of.
I love it.
And then you also asked the question, what am I most excited about in the future? Which is, although I'm optimistic, I think that AI is hugely important, but I don't think it'll go that fast as everybody is saying. I am again excited though about sort of that next wave of how our industry is changing. Right? If you go back to sort of when, now I'm getting old, when I started, there have been multiple waves, right? The normal digital wave, and then mobile, and then social, and retail, and now this one comes along, which means that everything's going to be moving, right? We're all a bit confused. We're all trying to figure it out. If you do it right, you will massively outperform the competition. So either if you are a brand or if you're an agency, if you figure it out right, you will be able to massively outperform and come out the other end as a more impactful player than you were before. The opposite side of it is if you screw it up, you will not be there anymore. And I think that is something that is like if there's anything which is motivating about this is figuring that out, and in the process making sure that you do some awesome work, you make some friends, and that you have a bit of fun along the way. So I am massively excited about the next 3 to 7 years, where this thing is really taking shape, and is changing everything that we do.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So where would you like to send people to learn more about DEPT, and where would you like to send people if they want to connect or reach out to you directly and learn more about either working with you or partnerships, etc.?
I wasn't expecting this blatant self-promotion here.
Hey, I gotta give you
Yeah,
gotta
of
give you
course.
the
But
call to action.
yeah, definitely. No, but it's fairly straightforward. If you go to deptagency.com, or you go to our either LinkedIn or Instagram handles, which are also Dept Agency, then you will land in a good spot. And we do a lot of publications there, and that's the very straightforward way of doing it. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. You will find me by my first name and last name attached. So always feel very free to reach out.
I love it. That's a young at heart CEO sharing his Instagram handle, not just his LinkedIn. I like it.
I must say I don't post that much anymore, because something with whatever. But I think you'll enjoy this. My last post was when I took my then 9-year-old son Lev in April of this year to the WWE show here in Amsterdam,
Ooh, that's
which
awesome.
that was my last Instagram story that I posted. And we went to another show last weekend in Paris, which I still have to fix into an Instagram story. This is probably not the most commercial thing to do on your Instagram, but I freaking like it. So there you go.
Hey, well, it's showing who you are as a person. And I remember when my dad took me to WrestleMania in Phoenix when I was a kid, and I still think about it, and I still have the finger with, like, I don't know if it was real blood or fake blood from Hulk Hogan as he walked down the aisle after he'd come out of for whoever he was wrestling. I forget, but
There we go. And just to be clear, Lev is the one I used to be a fan when I was little. I didn't do anything with it, and now he's like the massive fan. And John Cena was having his last European show, so we had to go. Anyways, that's on the Instagram handle. There you go.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, thanks so much, Dimi. Really appreciate your time today. It was exciting to learn more about your approach and how you guys have built DEPT up and where you guys are headed for the future. So thank you for joining. For those of you who are at home, if this is the first time you're tuning into the Ad Podcast, give us a follow or a subscribe. That's how we can show you more amazing deep dives with agency leaders, brand marketers, and ad tech founders. If you're listening to the show, give us a positive rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. That's how the show finds a larger organic audience. And last but not least, if you think there's somebody out there in agency land who you might want to share my conversation with Dimi, maybe a young executive who's thinking about applying AI in ways and getting into the industry that they maybe never thought about. Now is, as Dimi said, the best time ever to get into the industry without that historical baggage that is required from a resume of having a long-standing career in the industry. But last but not least, just share the show, and we will see you again shortly later on this week. Thanks again.